when difficult is fun. Okay, yeah, this is the video that we were going to watch.
Hey everybody. Very often we get questions like, why doesn't anybody make difficult games anymore? And the short answer to that is very simple. It's because people believe that difficult games don't sell. But this is false. Punishing games don't sell. So today we're going to talk about what distinguishes a game which is deliciously difficult from one which is just controller-crushingly punishing.
Yeah.
But first, let's tackle the why doesn't anybody make difficult games anymore question in a little more depth.
They fucking do.
For this, we really have to look at the history of the industry. When the video game industry began, it was centered around the coin-op experience. This meant that most of the games were intentionally very difficult to get you to keep pumping quarters into the arcade.
Bro, y'all have no idea. Like, if you go back, man... If you want to talk about, like, pixel-perfect shit, bro, back in the day, go and try to play the Simpsons arcade game. That was no joke. That game was no fucking joke. Yeah, super ghouls and goblins, Battletoads. Like, there's a reason why people kept calling up GameStop to see if they had it. Because they couldn't beat the game even 20 years later.
Many of the people who designed these arcade games then transferred over into the growing console industry, bringing their super challenging design philosophy with them. And counter to all current industry wisdom, this design philosophy worked reasonably well for the initial console audience.
Yeah, it did.
After all, the expectation was that the average player was 8 to 14 years old, male, and wouldn't be getting new games regularly, so they would have to make the games they had really last.
It's called the best example of this, The Lion King on Super Nintendo. The Lion King on Super Nintendo. If you ever think that there's a bad game, a hard game, that ruins your life.
Happy if there was a very high ceiling on skill so that they could continuously be rewarded for getting better at the game they had. And could play that game which really only had about 5 hours of content for 40 hours or more.
Yeah,
but then, as the years passed, production costs began to skyrocket. And in order to cover those production costs...
I think that's true too, man. Like, the games nowadays are too expensive. Like, I don't give a fuck if you get a paid, like, an actor to have, like, a motion capture suit to make a cinematic look slightly more realistic. Like, I just don't care about that. As a gamer, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I don't have, like, I don't see that and think to myself, oh, wow, I like the game more. Like, this is why I buy the game. These are like sprinkles on a cupcake. The gameplay is the goddamn cupcake itself, man. That's what it's fucking about. Same to just make the game. Yeah, it makes it overpriced, man. $70 fucking for a game just because you wanted to pay somebody to walk around in a motion capture suit? Get the fuck out of here.
Developers started having to reach for the widest audience possible. At the same time, some of the generation who began playing NES games when they were 12 were now able to start buying their own games, so replayability became less of an issue. Developers saw how many studios collapsed for making punishing games, so the new motto for these studios became, everybody wins. We transitioned from EverQuest to World of Warcraft, from Ghosts and Goblins to Maximo.
But yeah, WoW was way easier than EverQuest. It was way less punishing. It was a better game, but it was way less punishing.
And some really great games came out of this. We really had to step it up on usability, on properly crafted learning curves, and on evening out difficulty spikes.
Of course.
But we lost a little something too. There was something that games like Super C or Castlevania had that we are poorer for simply dismissing as an industry. But today, at last, with the ability to find alternate, cheaper avenues to distribute through, like Steam or Congregate, we're starting to experiment with difficulty again. So let's talk about what makes the difference between a game being punishing and it being something you love spending time trying to master. First,
I don't think that's entirely true. Because look at the new God of War. Isn't the new version of God of War, like the hardest difficulty, isn't that like just insanely fucking hard? Like, my understanding is that it's actually really fucking hard. So yeah, there are a lot of games. It's easy. Yeah, okay. Well, I think that it definitely qualifies for being hard. It's the same with like Dark Souls. People want games that are challenging, but they don't want games that are punishing. Dark Souls is challenging. Dark Souls 2 is punishing.
And most importantly is the consistency of rules. If you're playing a game where getting hit doesn't usually knock you back, and then an enemy without warning hits you and you fall back into a pit after a grueling play session, that is...
So, I just wanted to talk about, again, Dark Souls 2. How many fucking times do you walk into a room and then the guy is right behind... He's literally sitting here, right behind the door. Don't you come in here! And then you walk in and he hits you. He just gets you real fucking quick. It's so annoying, man. Like, that's the kind of game design that is just dog shit. Absolute fucking dog shit.
It's a rage quit moment. Dark Souls is a glorious example of a game obeying its own rules.
True and
From
real.
Software had a covenant with their players.
Yes.
Every character that ever appears follows all of the rules of the game. So every NPC, every monster that showed up in what normally would be a set-piece moment was killable. If you could see a monster from some crazy ledge you managed to get yourself to, you could shoot it till it was dead. There were no arbitrary, we don't want you to do that, invisible walls or invulnerable monsters. If you could find...
Are there any invulnerable monsters? Seath the Scaleless, Seath Part 1. I thought Ancient Dragon. That was my best guess. You can cut Ancient Dragon's tail off, but can you kill Ancient Dragon? The cat in the forest. You can't kill the cat in the forest? That might be
the
true,
solution. Yeah. You could do it. Of course, you don't have to go this far, but the harder your game is, the less you can mysteriously change your rules on the fly. Which is part and parcel with the second important part of enjoyable difficulty. Giving the player enough tools to work with. For something to be enjoyably difficult, rather than punishing, it has to allow the player an outlet to approach problems in new ways. When you fail to beat a challenge, you have to be able to say to yourself, I need to slide here.
I should do something different. Yeah, exactly.
Rather than simply relying on memorization, a la Battletoads. Which leads us nicely into talking about telegraphing. The player needs to have the ability to make informed choices about the game, even if they're split-second ones. An uninformed choice isn't actually a choice at all, and this means that everything has to hint at its consequences in some small way.
That's one of the problems I have with some of the New World abilities, is that they weren't telegraphed well. Because having bad telegraphing for mechanics is super frustrating, because it's like you're being punished for something that you just don't know is going to happen. I think that's always super boring to me.
You may remember games where 90% of the pits would kill you if you jumped into them, but the other 10% had secret rooms or important items in them. This is not only an inconsistency of the rules, but a failure to telegraph. This is punishing rather than difficult, because there's no choice, no player skill involved. Those of you who played the recent and otherwise great Fire Emblem Awakening on Classic Mode probably encountered moments when, without any specifics of where they'd show up, enemy units would appear behind your lines and get a turn to move before you could do anything. Often permanently killing off some of your characters. Punishing, not difficult. Because you couldn't play around it. There was no real choice you could make. You just had to restart the level and rely on your now memorized foreknowledge of where enemies were going to appear. Which, of course, brings us to iteration time. In simplest terms, to make a game not punishing, lower its iteration time. Given how much you, or at least I, died in Super Meat Boy, by all rights, it should have seemed punishing. But they very intelligently did everything they could to allow you as a player to jump right back in the second you died and try something new. The levels are so short that you're never more than 10 seconds from the challenge you failed at, and the respawn...
That's the same thing that they did with, like, adding checkpoints in Mario Maker.
Time isn't arbitrarily clogged with some interstitial screen asking you, do you want to continue? It's back into the action right away to try to solve the puzzle again. And that's where Fire Emblem in my previous example fails. Often, the arbitrary, unstoppable deaths occur right in the middle of a 20-minute-long battle that you're otherwise winning, which means the player now has 10 minutes of doing something they already succeeded at.
This is exactly what I was saying. This is exactly what I was fucking saying. This is why a fight like Heroic Rag would break so many guilds.
Longer engaging to them, just to get another crack at the problem they want to solve.
Exactly.
Next, there's usability. As we've said before, complexity does not equal difficulty. The more your players are able to understand and instantly utilize the tools you've given them, the wider variety of problems you can present them with,
Make things
and the larger
obvious.
range of interesting answers they can come up with. Just because you're making a game that's meant
Valheim's a really good example of this, where like you get an axe and you can cut down trees. It's very simple, it's very obvious. And I think that's something that everything needs, that you need to have.
Be mastered doesn't mean it should be hard to get into. I mean, think of Ikaruga. How simple are those mechanics? How readily understandable? And yet, they gave the player the tools they needed to face a plethora of challenges in an incredibly difficult game. This is as true for platformers as it is for shmups or strategy games. The wall slide in Super Meat Boy is something that is immediately understandable for the player, and so is something that the player can work with, something that the designer can rely on the player to problem solve with, because they feel comfortable using it. Just remember, a big part of that comfort is in controls. When we talk usability, we often talk about user interface or tutorials, but an awesome move that you understand but can't execute consistently might as well not even be in the game. Those of you who have played Warframe...
This is like the jump attack in Dark Souls. It's hard to do the jump attack in Dark Souls if you're playing with a keyboard and mouse. And so, yeah, I see this a lot. And there are many games like this that just make it super obnoxious.
Know what I mean when I simply say, sliding spin slash. It's awesome. I'd love to use it, but really, Shift
it's
Control
annoying as fuck to do.
W-E. Lastly, don't ignore difficulty curve. Just because a game is difficult doesn't mean that its difficulty can just fluctuate wildly all over the place, have huge spikes, or be unreasonably difficult up front. As a designer, you're not trying to defeat your player. You want them to overcome the challenge you're setting before them. Your goal as a designer is to get your player so invested, so engaged, that they want to beat this game, even though it's difficult. You don't want to simply set something before them that causes them to walk away because they hit a challenge which is too tough too early. That's just...
I think that's kind of a problem with Dark Souls 1. And this is an issue that I have with the game, is that Dark Souls 1, the hardest part of the game is Anor Londo. And everything after Anor Londo is easy. That's the truth. Like, it is fucking easy. Because at that point... Like, if you've already done everything, if you've completed everything else, no, it's just the beginning. Yeah, it's just the fucking beginning. Tomb of Giants is not hard. You just need to bring a lantern in, and you're never going to die. Like, it really, Blighttown, like, are you guys, the Kings, like, are you guys crazy? Have you never, look, all right, whenever I say this, okay, I want to make sure that you guys understand something real quick. I'm going to pull up my library. Whenever I say this, it is in the context of having 362 hours played in this fucking game. Everything gets easy after Anor Londo because it's all scaled to be beaten right after Anor Londo. So if you go and you beat the 4 kings, then you go and you do Nito. Nito is scaled from whenever you were before you beat the 4 kings. So you have 8 more fucking soul levels, 10 more soul levels, 2 more bars of health. You've got way more health. By the time that you get to Gwyn, he's a joke. He's one of the easiest bosses in there. You guys are crazy. The dogs in Tomb of Giants are hard. No, they're not. No, they're fucking not. The only part that's hard in Tomb of the Giants is whenever you have the Black Knight that attacks you with the dog. And that's it. And you don't even need to deal with that. You can pull the Black Knight if you know where he is. You guys are crazy.
Punishing. It is very easy to make a punishing game. It is quite challenging, though, to get your player through a difficult one. So to sum up, this industry doesn't have to give up on difficult games. Things like Meat Boy and Dark Souls prove that. But if I had to give one piece of final advice, I would just say this. As a designer, when the player fails, you want them to always feel as though they could have done better. You want them to have that aha moment where they realize some small thing they could do differently and be hungry to try again. If instead they feel like the game made them fail, then you have failed as a designer. If your rules are inconsistent, if your player isn't presented with choices they can work with, or a game that's usable enough, or if you demand that the player wade through minutes of content they already mastered just to get another chance at the thing they failed at, you have created a game which is punishing, not difficult. And punishing games will never succeed.
Yeah.
See you in Anor Londo.
See? Even he knows. Even he fucking knows. I don't agree with this at all. You want a crutch to help you get by things you can't deal with. In an MMORPG, this would make content a joke. Like, I've done this phase once, I don't want to do it again. That's just indolent? No, I don't want to have bad gameplay. Like, it's very simple, okay? I think Final Fantasy has very challenging gameplay. There's no reason to think that it doesn't. So, I don't know why. I think WoW has conditioned so many players to fixate on this idea of difficulty and to fixate on this idea of like, oh, well, it has to punish me. It has to, like, a game has to waste my time. No, it fucking doesn't. It does not have to waste my time. If a game feels like it's wasting my time, I don't want to deal with it, all right? And I would say most of the people that have that mindset are probably mediocre players. Then the only thing that they can take advantage of, Swedish Fish, congrats on Necromancer, by the way. He got that yesterday. The only people that really care about that kind of stuff are bad players that the only thing that they can invest into the game is time. So that's the one way that they can differentiate themselves from other people. Yeah, classic Andes, exactly.